Good evening, friends. John here from What's Spinning. Happy New Year, my friends. Hope everybody had a great holiday season. And like I said, Happy New Year. It's 2024. And I took a few weeks off. I did my list week. Hope everybody enjoyed it. If you haven't seen the videos yet, go check them out. But I've got another week before new music starts dropping. And this year I decided to do something with that week that we have here. So what I'm going to be doing over the next few days is I'm going to be doing some throwback reviews. Maybe not classics in everyone's mind, although, a lot of them are considered classic, but more importantly, these are albums that inspired me to start reviewing music. These are albums that I would say really inspired me to get on YouTube and start doing what I'm doing now. And I'm starting off this week with arguably one of my favorite albums of all time, and that would be Nine Inch Nails' 1994 classic, The Downward Spiral. You know who they are? They are industrial metal legends. I mean, outside of like Ministry, I feel like Nine Inch Nails are the go-to when it comes to industrial of any generation. And in my teens, they were a band that really resonated me quite a bit, even though, I'm going to be honest, some of my first listens to Nine Inch Nails came from some of their later albums, like With Teeth and Year Zero. I was not, at the time really familiar with their 90s output, but, eventually I did go back and I was really blown away because a lot of those records still to this day mean so much to me. I mean, whether it be Pretty Hate Machine or the Broken EP, even the Fragile that was released a little later on. But to me, the Downward Spiral deserves all of the critical acclaim that it's gotten over the years. As a matter of fact, I would argue that the Downward Spiral, as well as another album that we'll be chatting about a little later on this week, actually taught me how to listen to an album and look at it as this art piece from start to finish. And that means a lot to me. Now, this album has been swimming in controversy since it first got released. I mean, for one hand, the lyrics are not going to be for everyone. They get massively, introspective, but also depressive, suicidal, and pretty intense at points. It does not hold any punches. Also, this album at the time gained a lot more, attention because Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails rented the house where Sharon Tate got murdered by the Manson family to record this album in. Tells you some things about this record. But that being said, as far as its sheer brutality, its storytelling, its narrative, and its creativity, it's become a staple in 90s rock and just a really defining moment of metal music. And we're going to chat about it. Mr. Self-Destruct starts this album off. It's a track that you should be familiar with if you're familiar with the album. It is just freakish right off the bat between the twisted sample and the very quick escalation into rising tension that we get here. Seconds later, we got bulky synths, wailing guitars, and Trent Reznor's legendary self-loathing lyrics. It's paranoid as well. It really does just capture the elements of this album and its sounds and wraps them up into a very exciting, throttling, noisy intro. From the intense synth passages to the sweet moments of release, you really do get quite a lot of different sounds here. And from there, this album just takes off. Next up, we have Piggy, which, when you look at it, is a really unique track for Nine Inch Nails, whether it's like on this album or some of their later stuff. It's very different for them. He's got this low-key, swanky, sort of sleazy bass riff and some of the least subtle lyrics on this entire album. It's also one of like 900 tracks, I feel like, that Trent Reznor has used the lyrics "Nothing Can Stop Me Now." But between that, the repeated lyrics, and the tension, this thing is damn near hypnotic. Add in the use of ambient sounds and the jazzy drum solo we get towards the end, it's pretty mesmerizing stuff. It's a legendary cut for the reason, and honestly, Trent Reznor's the charisma in his performance here, the swagger, it's pretty shocking. Heresy is a personal favorite of mine. It was one of the first initial tracks that just really hit me hard here. If you like Nine Inch Nails at their synthiest, this is definitely it. The synths on this track are very memorable, but it's got the same blood-pumping energy and just feeling that the rest of this album has. I love the wailing guitars that come crashing in after every nihilistic chorus here. And Trent's falsettos are a little ridiculous at times, but once again, the charisma on this album is awesome. Yeah, put this on your gym playlist. March of the Pigs, too, while you're at it. It's a classic track for a reason. It's constantly fidgeting, it's paranoid, it's intense. The pummeling riff and the wailing synths, this is one for the mosh pit. It's probably one of the most straightforward and instantaneous tracks that Nine Inch Nails has ever put out. But for me, the real magic of this track is the duality. We get these caffeinated, muscular passages that just make you want to swing your fucking fists, man. And then you get this chorus that is actually quite beautiful. It's definitely a release, but yeah, it's pretty great. We also have Closer here. You know it. Your mom's probably scared of it. Few Nine Inch Nails tracks are known more than this. And it really does hold up as a sort of slinking, sleazy, creeping along explosion of sexuality. But it does go a lot further than a kinky chorus and a legendarily freaky music video. But in a lot of ways, this is the cornerstone of the album. Once you get past the fucking like an animal, it really does play to all of this album's narrative strengths. Throw in some stellar production and just like iconic synth riff and a really awesome keyboard finale here that is just so memorable. It's classic for a reason. Ruiner actually took me like years to really enjoy it, but now it's become one of my favorite tracks here. Not only is this one of the synthier tracks that you're going to find here, as far as the electronic elements of Nine Inch Nails' music goes, look no further. I mean, we practically get a dance groove here. Is it a weird left field one? Yes, but let's not kid ourselves, you can move to this. It's got layers of synths and noisy guitar and crashing production, and on top of that, one of Trent's most manic performances that he's ever put out, and that's saying something. Like, I especially love that aggressive blast that he always gives us right before the chorus. Oh, and I love the way that this track just completely deconstructs itself by the end of it. All before one last great aggressive blast from Trent. It's fantastic. The Becoming has also been a personal favorite of mine. I do remember vividly writing lyrics from this track on the back of many a notebook in high school. It's gritty, it's hellish, the samples of screaming just get under my skin every time. Add an intense, very devilish performance from Trent, and you've got yourself a hell of a track. The slow pace to this track will keep you on the edge of your seat. But it's the little details here, once again, that I keep coming back to, like the release that we get here, once again, with this acoustic bridge that's really light on the ears and very fluffy. And then we get the duality of these lyrics that are literally eating themselves alive. And as this album rolls on, it gets more hellish, more twisted, more visceral, and honestly, at points, tougher to listen to. But as an album, it is truly one of the most creative pieces of the 90s. Also, The Becoming may have the best chorus on here. I do not want this. Honestly, this was another track that in my teens this was a skipper for me. This was one track that I was not into, but it has grown on me immensely. As with The Becoming, this track makes this album a much more schizophrenic and depressive experience, pummeling you further down that hole. Intense visual lyrics of violence and even worse at points. It's not for the faint of heart. It's another plus 5 minute track. This is a long album, by the way, but tracks like this progress really nicely. The production is often super ahead of its time. Some of the tricks on this album are great. And the warped, hellish final moments are fantastic, as well as the transition to the next track here, Big Man with a Gun. I mean, this is just your old classic feel-good jam. I mean, let me look at my notes here. Got me a big old dick and I like to have fun. It's also oddly joyous. Take that with whatever you want. Later in the album, we get tracks like A Warm Place, and this, to me, is what makes this not just another CD. This makes it an album here. Like, this really does string the ideas of this album together beautifully. Now, obviously, in later years, Trent has done a lot of ambient work as well as soundtrack work and found a lot of success doing it. And this and another track on the album are kind of his first delves into that sort of sound. It's oddly peaceful, especially for this album. I would argue tear-jerkingly beautiful at times. But it also has the same deep darkness that the rest of this album has, and it's honestly really tragic. Now, I hate to say it, but even with some of my all-time favorite records, there's always that one track that just does not really sit well with me. And Eraser, after all this time, it's still not my favorite track. And that's not to say that I've got nothing, nice to say about this track. I think narratively it actually progresses the album really well. But instrumental-wise, it's just a little too plotting for me, and I feel like nothing happens for the first few minutes. It's just not the best use of their sound. But they answer that back with arguably my favorite track here, Reptile. I love just how creeping and tense this track starts off. When these synths come in, they sound like goddamn gunshots. Trent's performance here, lyrically and vocally, does not get any better than this. Lyric-wise, this cuts on so many levels with just how visual and visceral this is. He also sounds like a dangerous, deranged lunatic, which is where I like hearing my Trent Reznor. And this is the longest track here, but there is not a single wasted second. And his absolute freak out in the final 30 seconds, and the synths that have just gotten straight zany at that point, it's awesome, man. This album's title track, The Downward Spiral, does a lot of the same things that A Warm Place did really well. It's another completely instrumental track, and one that's just as instrumental to this album's narrative. From the uneasy ambiance to the strummed reprise of Closer to the teasing of Hurt that's right around the corner to the surreal production, this is very David Lynch. And the build-up to the final scream on this track, I mean, it is just awesome. I mean, that scream is money. I mean, much like The Rug in The Big Lebowski, it really did tie the room together, didn't it? And for a finale here, we have Hurt, which honestly, I mean, I don't know what there else is to say about this at this point. It's one of the most cutting, personal, and layered alternative rock tracks, not only of the 90s, but like ever. The pacing, Trent's lyrics, the symbolism, the sense of defeat, and also sort of rebirth, the intense, desolate, ambient sounds of the verses, but the oddly hopeful chorus. It is a masterpiece. It is the perfect ending to an absolutely classic album, and to me, this is one of the best metal releases of all time. It is a standout album as far as creativity, narrative goes wise. The production is awesome. Lyrically, yeah, it's gonna be tough to listen to, but for the album, just if you ever want to listen to an album from start to finish, a narrative, this is a great place to start, man. It's a classic in my book, and one of the reasons that I started this channel here. But let me know what you all think about it. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know what you'd like for me to chat about in the future. Until next time, have a great day, friends.